One of the most vivid memories of my boyhood is sitting at the base of an oak tree building a village. I'd make little roads, little homes, houses in the dirt, had cars, trucks. It was my own village. Could do anything that I wanted there. Make little special getaway opportunities. Make this kind of be pretty over here. Here's where we did this over here. Here's where people can do this over here if they want to. There's something, at the time, obviously I wasn't thinking about it. I just remember really enjoying it. It was my village. I could do with it as I wanted. I was making something. Another vivid memory is we played war a lot, right? There were different kinds of fighting that we would do. Boy, there's just all different kinds of ways you'd fight, and sometimes we had the toy guns, and sometimes we had this and that and the other. You had forts, and it's amazing how much we enjoyed simply playing at fighting. So, there's so much to consider there. Boys, I think you can say, are naturally builders, and we're naturally fighters. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not something of building and fighting in ladies, but there's something that's particularly characteristic of boys that they go in that direction. And I'm not interested to get into an argument, well, is it possible this is all cultural conditioning? I'm just going to say, experience, I think, just speaks pretty strongly the other direction. Whether it's thinking of our own experience of people we know, whether it's even looking at studies of what boys like to do, how boys spend their time, how boys play differently than girls do. I think it's pretty clear there's some natural difference there. Now, one could say, how do we interpret that? The interesting thing is if you take an evolutionary approach, it's interesting, but I think that removes a bit of a deeper meaning that I'm confident is there. If we look at the great philosophical traditions, say go back to the Greeks, go back to the Romans. If we look at the Christian tradition, there's always tended to be this approach. Look to what seems to be natural, and we're going to learn something about who we are. There's something going on there that's not just random. It's not accidental. It's not, it just happened to happen because it was simply better for survival. I don't mean to eliminate the whole evolutionary perspective at all. There's a whole question to be had there. Though, it's interesting, studies show that males of many species are more pugnacious. They're more clearly suited to fighting/defending. Again, you definitely could go kind of evolutionary there. I think there's good reason to find something richer, something at least also, in any case, in addition to that, where there's a kind of wisdom that's written into nature that's making males be different from females, and then particularly when you come to humans, making men be different from women. And go back to the building and the fighting. I was reading a study that the Legos company was doing at how boys and girls play differently. And they set them up with a castle and with knights. And they definitively found that the boys, after they had built the castle, were very much drawn in the direction of, okay, now we're going to have fights. Now we're going to have the knights start fighting. And they definitively did this more than the girls did. All right, so there's something kind of going on. So you see this, if you have sons, you've probably experienced this. Like, why is it, are they just trying to make fights happen? Right? Well, to some extent, the answer to that might be yes. So what's going on? I want to look for the deeper reason. And I want to put an order between the two. It's not just, oh, hey, okay, they just happen to be builders. They just happen to be fighters. There's a relationship between the two. I like to suggest that they are fighters because they're builders. Fighting is ultimately about building. experience shows, and I think even young boys have a sense that I have to be ready to fight. It might not be something that's actually fully developed in their mind. Building things requires, in any case, being ready to fight for the sake of building them, to fight for the sake of defending or preserving them. So that makes us ask, well, if us men don't have a clear sense of what there is to build, what does that mean for this fighting side of us? And I'd like to make an assertion. To the extent that we don't have a clear sense of what there is to build, or what is worthwhile building, our fighting is going to go awry. Indeed, we'll tend to become fighters just for the sake of fighting. If you don't have something good and worthwhile to fight for, that aspect of us that has a sense that we have to be ready to fight, it's going to, in a sense, take on a life of its own. And when men become fighters just for the sake of fighting, it can be extremely ugly. Ugly for them, ugly for those around them. So we need to ask ourselves the question, what is there that's worth building, that is the basis for fighting, that makes at least some fighting worthwhile, that makes us see, it makes sense. Sometimes, absolutely, is the time to fight. And isn't it intuitively a big sense of becoming a man, of going from that boy who just kind of fights for play, fights for the sake of fighting, to go from a boy to a man? We need to learn to discern, to see what's worth fighting for and when do you not fight. I want to say something about games. There's a great point in Plato's Republic where Plato has Socrates say, games are a very important part of how youth are formed. And Socrates is convinced that there are good games and there are bad games. There's a way of playing that actually forms the body and the soul to grow in maturity, to grow in character, to see things more clearly. So here I think it's very important that we not say, hey, boys are naturally fighters, so let's just give them, games where they can fight in any old way. Because fighting particularly is an area where a boy or a man can go wrong, can become selfish, and can especially do great damage to others. Here, a boy, a man, needs to learn how to fight, or what is worth fighting for, and what are the right ways of going about doing that. And Plato, in the case, was certainly convinced that games can help train us to see that more clearly. There's other things too. Good stories, good examples help us to learn to sort that out. So in an age where there's, I think, a lot of bad games, I'm not going to right now talk about very specific things, but I think we all can imagine the obvious examples of this, and then maybe some even more sinister, subtle examples, certain kinds, whether it's video games or other kinds of games that maybe in an unreasonable way appeal to something in boys that makes boys go like, oh yeah, I want to do that. And we might think, well, isn't this natural then? It's just appealing to their natural fighting instinct. But it might be appealing to it in a way that brings it out negatively, in a way that brings it out in a very self-satisfying way, in a selfish way, giving them a sense of power. And this is a great dynamic in the moral life. Are men going to use something that they tend to experience that they have, namely power? Are they going to use that for good, in the service of others? Or are they going to use it simply in service of themselves, in a selfish, self-oriented way? So games, we need to be attentive to them, and we need to think about what are the ways of starting to play at fighting in a way that prepares us to be able to fight well in real life. How do you discern when to fight? This is a huge part, of becoming a man, of growing as a man. The great virtue of prudence, to discern what's really good, what is the good here to be defended, and to recognize sometimes in pursuit of or in defense of this particular good, now I need to fight. At other times, in pursuit of or even defense of this good, it's appropriate that I not fight. Maybe I need to walk away. Maybe I need to run. And it's never out of a concern of, well, will other people think that I'm strong? Will other people think that I'm capable? Right? We all know this is a sign of the immature man, the man that isn't thinking clearly and well about who he is. He doesn't have a strong enough sense of who he is and his place in life, that he's somewhat obsessed or overly concerned about people thinking that he's strong. At the end of the day, you don't need to look strong. You need to be strong. You need to be strong for the right reason, in defense of things that ultimately themselves are not about fighting. All of the most important things in life are not themselves fighting. We don't build so that we can fight. We fight so that we can build, and then more ultimately, because the building isn't the most ultimate thing. What's more ultimate than building is the living the good life together. Fighting, building for the sake of the richness of a good human life lived together. At the end of the day, that amazing reality called fatherhood is what explains it all. Building is for the sake of being fathers. Being a father is more than just building something, but it very much includes building, or we might say it enriches the notion of building. All building takes on its deeper, more ultimate sense when we think about fatherhood. Fatherhood is about human life in all its richness. We're not just talking about biological fatherhood. We're talking about full fatherhood that's about human life, about generating it, about supporting it, about bringing it about in a multitude of ways. That's building in the rich sense. That's what gives us that deeper sense of, hey, I'm not actually a builder. Fatherhood focuses us on the people that all building is ultimately about.